Hello, my name is Stacy Freeman, and I'll be presenting on behalf of my partner Jordan Blazer, as he and I both work together to bring you this presentation on confined and enclosed spaces and other dangerous atmospheres in shipyard employment, which is OSHA Standard 1915.12. What we hope you take away from today's presentation is that you are able to identify the main hazards that are dealt with concerning shipyard confined space, that you are able to recognize controls that can minimize the amount of risk associated with confined space, and that you are able to provide response plans for rescue if needed. So when looking into shipyard employment, confined and enclosed spaces have a greater likelihood of causing fatalities, severe injuries, and illnesses, mainly due to the hazards that are associated with them. This is also a unique industry in that adjacent spaces next to each other can be impacted by the work that's taking place within them, such as hot work, for example. A hazard that is associated with these is oxygen content, as you want a competent person to determine the atmosphere's oxygen content prior to entry for hazards such as flammable and toxin hazards, hazardous fumes, as well as materials that can cause an oxygen deficiency. Ideally, you don't want a space that has too little or too much oxygen, as an oxygen deficiency can provide it to be difficult for workers to breathe in, as you will label it not safe for workers, whereas an oxygen-rich atmosphere can produce an accelerant for explosions, which you will label it not safe for workers or hot work. Another hazard is flammable atmospheres, as you'd also want a competent person to determine the presence of combustible gases or flammable liquids by way of visual inspection, which you will look for flammable liquids within the area, as well as air monitoring tests for combustible gases within the area as well. Atmospheres with concentrations greater than 10% of the lower explosive limit should be labeled as not safe for workers and not safe for hot work. You'd want to keep these concentrations below this level by maintaining the appropriate ventilation, as well as keeping ignition sources away from it that can produce an explosion. Toxic atmospheres are another hazard that are associated, as you'd want a competent person to determine the presence of air concentration of the toxics, corrosives, or irritants that could be within the space, also by way of visual inspection or air monitoring testing. If concentrations of the materials exceeds the PEL or is immediately dangerous to life and health, a certified industrial hygienist must retest this area and place the appropriate restrictions on it. That way, workers with authorization may be equipped with the appropriate personal protective equipment needed upon entry into the space. For PPE needed for a confined space, the appropriate respiratory protection equipment, as well as gloves, full body suits, and face shields are necessities according to OSHA Subpart I. Other provisions on these hazardous atmospheres can be found in Subpart I and Subpart Z of the OSHA standards. Employees shall be trained upon entry into a confined space to recognize the characteristics, anticipate and be aware of possible hazards, as well as recognizing health effects, and have knowledge on PPE for safe entry and exiting, as well as the proper use of the personal protective equipment they are using. Employees should be trained to exit a confined space whenever evacuation is ordered, mainly due to the possibility of a hazardous situation, as well as whenever evacuation signals such as alarms are activated, or whenever danger is perceived by the employee. Training shall be provided by the employer to the employee before the employee begins work upon entry into the confined space, and whenever there is a change in operations or duties that may present a new hazard, such as a change in personnel or a change in machinery for that instance. The training shall be certified by the employers. This certification shall contain the name of the employee, the name of the certifier, as well as the date of certification, which shall be made available for all entities who are associated with the facility and may need the information on the confined space and certification. Rescue teams are required to be at the facility. These can either be internal or external, which they will be used for response at the request for rescue service at the facility. For rescue teams, they must be properly trained on the use of the personal protective equipment needed, as well as being trained on the rescue functions of entering and exiting a confined space. They must also rehearse these skills every 12 months with the use of the proper equipment needed, and practicing in a facility that's similar to the actual facility of the confined space. You want a person with to have at least some knowledge on first aid procedures. This person shall have knowledge on airway maintenance, control of bleeding for open wounds, as well as maintenance of circulation and CPR skills. Employers are to warn rescue teams of possible hazards when performing a rescue at a facility. That way, the rescue teams may be better prepared with the appropriate protective equipment needed and to be trained on the appropriate functions of a safe rescue upon entering a confined space. Employers are also required to share all available information with other companies whose employees may enter the same space or atmosphere that their employees may enter as well. This information includes information on hazards, safety rules, as well as emergency procedures of the facility. Though this presentation concerns mainly shipyards, most, if not all of these concepts can be used for most confined spaces in other industries as well. Well, that is all we have for you. We hope you've enjoyed our presentation on confined and enclosed spaces and other dangerous atmospheres in shipyard employment. Thank you.